And welcome back to part 4 of Final Fantasy XII, where today you find us leaving Rabanastre via the south gate to enter the XII Plains. The XII Plains is made up of several small areas that make up a giant circle, with a point in the middle where a small outpost is, and a point at the end where you can transition into the following area beyond here. That being said, the area beyond here is definitely not worth travelling to, because you won't survive, so don't worry about it now. And similar to the T-Rex in the Ester Sands, there is another enemy in this area that if you see, you need to avoid at all costs, because it will drastically outpower you. Especially because the more powerful enemy in this area is a predator-based enemy. It will turn hostile on you if you even approach it. And it's not those weird giant things you might have just seen us pass by, which you'd think it is. There's another enemy to the south of this area, and they're these big guys that carry these huge like war sword things. And I'll mention them as they pop up, and they are your biggest threats in this area. They will rinse you if you give them the chance. But your main priority when you first enter here is getting to that outpost in the middle, so we can get more information on where to actually retrieve this sunstone. And the enemies in the XII Plains are a step up from the Ester and Wester stands, because there are new enemies here. And all of them are significantly stronger than what you may be used to. They're not impossible to deal with though, and there is some good rewards here if you go out of your way to explore every nook and cranny. It's just being careful as you travel not to put yourself in a position you can't get yourself out of. Especially, as you might have just noticed, I've yet to shop in this playthrough. Everything I've done in this playthrough so far, you've seen. There hasn't been a moment so far where I haven't been recording, so I haven't actually visited an item shop because I haven't shown it off. And I won't be showing it off until we get back to Rabanastre, not after this side quest, but after we've infiltrated the palace. Because that is our next objective. Once we get the Sunstone, we can get the Crescent Stone, and with the Crescent Stone we can infiltrate the palace. After we infiltrate the palace, we'll be going through a fair amount of hoops, but we'll eventually return to Rabanastre. And when we do, from there is when I'll start the meat of my shopping in this game, because there's a lot of things that will become available for us to do, and so I want to kind of just save my gil until we get there. Which is easier said than done, because there are going to be moments early on, as you can kind of already tell, that are going to be relatively dangerous. These Astrixes can be pretty deadly at this stage of the game if they gang up on you, so take them on one by one if you can. If two of them chase and come after you, your best idea is to actually just find a pinch point where only one can pass through, so you can just get the attack on whilst the other one has to wait. Similar to these hyenas, which are the weirdest looking hyenas I've ever seen. They're just a stronger version of the wolves that you encountered in the Wester and Ester stands. And so having them gang up on you in about 3 or 4 of a group may be worth running away from. As you're wandering around the XII Plains, you'll find 2 variations of a bizarre rock. One that's just like a big old rock, and one that's glowing and like slightly floating. The slightly floating rocks have the weirdest description if read out loud in the game, because it will say the dark rock is shining, or something like that. And you're like, well, hang on a minute, what do you mean dark? And it's shining. Or something like that. It's like either the dark rock is shining or the dark rock is glowing. And it's just like, well, how can it be dark and glowing? Which I know is a completely pointless thing, and it's probably just a weird thing in translation how it is, but I've always just found it really weird. And around this point is where you're going to start noticing that I probably should have shopped for a couple more potions, because we don't have any, and Vaan is struggling a little bit now. And so I have to cut my exploration around the area short, but there is a new spell you can pick up there, which was worth getting first. Blind, a black magic spell. Red battle mages and black mages can use that. There are also other classes in the game that can use a small amount of black magic that we will get to if they show up later on. But for that, I held down R2 and I just got the hell out of there because I wouldn't have survived another encounter. Anytime you touch a save point, it completely restores your health and magic. So even just touching that save crystal, Vaan is now back up to square. And if you talk to the people around here, they'll say, "Oh, you're seeking the Sunstone." Well, there's a kid south from here who has it, and or at least would know how to get it. Making the Sunstone is a chore we give to the children around camp. They roam the plains, travelling the Dark Crystals, transferring from Dark Crystal to Dark Crystal. One of the children, Jin, has not yet returned. He's carrying a supply of Shade Stones. If you find Jin for me and tell him to come back to their camp, you may take one of our Shade Stones. Some of the children said he may have seen him south of their camp. He may want to speak to himself before leaving. Please find Jin and bring him home at once. So there's our objective. But before we can press on, Penello's here for some reason.
Penello? What are you doing here?
I could ask you the same, though the answer is pretty clear. No good.
What? I'm being good.
Is that right? So then you wouldn't mind if I, say, tagged along, would you?
Huh?
Oh, don't worry. Miguelo's busy with preparations for the fete up at the palace. Why, I'm free for the whole day. Well, let's get going.
And with this, two things are introduced to us. Firstly, a second party member that we are not in direct control of, and gambits. Our second party member, at any given time, you can swap leadership over to by tapping on the D-pad. Tapping left or right on the D-pad will bring up the entire character list, and then from there you can swap between them. Penello also has access to the same grid, so you can go through and pick up what you feel will work best for her. I eventually decided to go with White Mage, because White Mage is dedicated healing and recovery duty. Which, having someone do that, because that can also apply to protection, so being able to buff yourself, is a necessary evil. However, like Vaan, she is not someone who is intended to be a part of my main three, which is why I went White Mage. The next character that I'll want to give healing duty to would be made a Red Battle Mage, because Red Mages in Final Fantasy, although do not have as strong a use of magic, have access to both white and black magic, so can defend and protect their allies, while at the same time attacking themselves, or being able to attack from themselves. So Penello, being a dedicated White Mage, also just keeps out of trouble and is another person then I don't need to shop for. On the side there is a girl called Carmina that you can talk to that will give you more information, and there's also some basic shopkeepers you can find around here to buy some early equipment, which after my struggles of running out of potions, I deter away from my original plan to leave the open shops of Rabanastre and go completely without shopping until I go back to Rabanastre, to getting a bit of shopping done now, but still only having the main brunt of it be done when I return to Rabanastre after the palace visit. There's also two shops here, not just one. One where you can buy a map of the area from, which I always recommend doing, especially on your first playthrough, because it will cut down a lot of the busy work of finding your way through, because otherwise you will absolutely just be wandering back and forth through the areas. As you can see, there's actually two exit points, one going northwest and one going northeast. You might be able to already work out where one of them goes, but the other one might surprise you to find out it doesn't quite go to the Wester Sands, it goes to an area just south of the Wester Sands, which is far more dangerous than the normal Wester Sands, and you might find yourself getting overrun there quite quickly. Also, when you're in this area, Penello's theme continues to play until you leave, so enjoy that, I suppose. When you go through armor and accessories, if you have the license for it, the character's icon will be lit up in the corner and not faded out like you can see with these lower sets down here. Of course, depending on what job you pick will dictate what things are available to you and what things are not. You can also equip a basic bangle here, which, although we don't need it now, much later in the game will be nice to have on at least someone, because bangle will have permanent Libra on you. Libra, or Libra, is an analysis based spell. It allows you to read your enemy's stat lists, but it also allows you to analyze things in the environment, such as being able to locate where traps are. And it's something that is a bit of a complaint towards this game, and it's something that I kind of wish was handled different, but I'll just take it for what it is. This is another criticism as well, but one thing at a time. The traps in this game, when they are introduced, you can't dismantle them, you can't work around them, you just need to avoid them. Because if you hit them, they will do insane amounts of damage, and you just can't get around it. and so it can be extremely punishing if you do not have Libra on at least someone. Alternatively, later on you'll have the ability to cast Float on everyone, and Float will make it so you can't trigger the traps, but you're not going to get that till far later, and it's a waste of a Gambit to have it on, so it's kind of hard to encourage and recommend doing that unless you're exploring. But the second criticism that I want to quickly bring up, and it's a much smaller nitpicky one, like it's never bothered me that much, it's just something worth mentioning a little bit. You might have seen there that there was a bunch of resources that I just sold off. Most enemies in the game will drop resources that kinda contribute to nothing. However, if you sell them to shopkeepers, they will turn it into special purchases, so it is always worth selling them. However, for some insane reason, your teleport stone and your magic stones are also a part of that same category. Now, the elemental stones don't mean that much right now, so it doesn't bother me. So I don't mind selling them at this point, but the teleport stones, they are what allow you to teleport between orange crystals, which I mentioned very briefly at the end of the last part. You have blue crystals which you can save from, and orange crystals that you can transport between other orange crystals from. So having teleport stones, and as many as you can, is absolutely worth having because it will cut down on the busy work of travelling later on. And the fact that it's just a part of the same category, so you could accidentally sell it, is just painful. But as I said, with just a tap of the D-pad you can swap it to who you're in control of. And this also introduces us to gambits, but not gambit customization. That's still for a little bit. Gambits is another word for AI. You're turning on and off their AI, and you can also turn it on for Vaan if you so wish to, but Vaan's gambits at this point in the game kinda don't work because his gambits are set to attack whatever the party leader is attacking. So it will only work if you're playing as Penelo, but Penelo's attack is also attack whoever the party leader is attacking. So either way, if you have both people on gambits, nothing will happen. You still have to be in control. As you can see, she's only got an attack ready because I targeted an enemy and it ran away. So she's just waiting for her attack to initiate, which eventually doesn't happen because we stray too far from it. The gambit customization later on is something that I will probably be spending a lot of time talking about and then re-talking about as it opens up, because when it's first given to you, it's very limited with what you can do with it, but when it reaches its full potential, it's legendary, especially if you have a mage on your team. Well, you should absolutely have at least one mage on your final team regardless of what you do, but your mage, what you can get them to do, what you can get them to achieve is mind-blowing with the gambit system, without ever having to actually use them yourself outside of emergencies. Or you just feel like doing something different. But now we actually have the two team members, you're going to see that these battles are going by a lot quicker, and we're getting through them with far less issue. Which is great. Also, there it was, dark crystal is brimming with light. Your maximum party hold is 3. But there will be 6 main party members throughout the duration of the game that we will recruit. So you know what that means? It means similar to Death End Request when we played that, you're going to have 3 on the front line and 3 as backups at any given time. However, to game over in this game, the entirety of your party have to be defeated. So if your primary team is defeated, you'll just be taken to the menu screen and you'll swap out your team members for your backups. Which is kinda gonna spell doom for most people's playthrough. Because even if you try and space out between all 6 members, you're gonna have preferred members. And in big fights that you know are dangerous, you're gonna put your preferred members first. And if they then go down, you're gonna struggle. Because all you can really do with your other team is either only put in a couple of them and hope that you can revive the people who were in your main team and then just rotate out the dead ones with the live ones as you go. Or you just need to run away. And in some situations later on, you won't get the chance. You'll have to do or die. I say this, but this is all things that don't really come into play until the optional dungeons later in the game. There are some mandatory parts of the game that can be pretty tough. Like, I won't spoil them, because even though this game's a decade old, it's a very long ass game, so I can imagine a lot of people really didn't get that far in this when it first came out, especially with how different it was. But there's 2 specific dungeons that are infamous, one for it being very confusing and one for it being extremely long, that come in much later in the game. And both of them have some pretty difficult enemies in there if you make the mistake of going the wrong way. But when you go down here, there's another save crystal, and you can also find this young lad Jin, who after a small little cutscene will explain to you that he's hurt his leg, so can't get you the sunstone and get home on his own, so instead asks you to collect the sunstone for him, explaining that to get a sunstone you need to first have a shade stone, which he's about to give us. The shade stone, you didn't have to walk up to the glowing rocks you would have seen around the Giza Plains, which you definitely should have, because the only way, and I actually quite like this, the only way to get to this point is to have walked past at least 3 of them. You would have, regardless of which direction and which path you walk past, you would have walked past 2 glowing crystals and 1 stone crystal. And even if you didn't get it, Jin's going to quickly point it out to you now what you're looking for. These glowing rocks around the Giza Plains are what you're heading towards. Just go up to them, interact with them, and it will start to resonate with the Shade Stone. Once it's resonated enough and collecting enough energy, it will turn into the Sunstone. And from there, we'd be able to get into the palace. Not that Penelope knows that what we're doing it for, she just knows we're trying to get a Sunstone. And just you saw there, I did just cut out a save. And even if you're struggling even more, it notifies it on the map. There's another new enemy down here, the Sleipnir, or the Sleipnir, or whatever, however you want to call it. It's a weird name. Is it Sleipnir? Is it Sleipnir? I've called it Sleipnir for the longest time, but I might be dead wrong with that. But there's also another enemy down here that you need to be painfully aware of. You see those 2? They will kill you. They will kill both of you in 1 hit, and you won't do anything to counter it. They expect you to be around level 30 to level 40 before you take them on. They are by far the most dangerous enemies at this point of the game. The T-Rex isn't even as dangerous as those guys, and there's 2 of them. They will absolutely demolish you if you decide to attack them now. So stay out of their way, because if you even go near them, their health bars above their head are red. They will just turn on you without you attacking them. You don't have to attack them for them to turn on you. They will do over 600 to 700 damage in a single strike, and you might have noticed, unless you've done a shit ton of grinding at this point in the game, you don't have 600 to 700 health to spare. And here's me highlighting that you can't actually turn on Vaughn's Gambits now, but it wouldn't be of any help. And this will continue for still a fair while, until we get a full team of 3. You won't be introduced to Gambit customization, but once Gambit customization is introduced, it's game on. This game really opens up the moment Gambit customization is in, but it's another thing that I can kinda sorta criticise, because it's something they didn't learn from with 13. The most interesting thing with the gameplay takes just a tad too long to be introduced. So some of the things that might change someone's mind from thinking this game's alright to actually thinking it's pretty good, is unfortunately after initial impressions are made. Your first impressions on this game are already going to be made before you get access to the thing that really makes it. And some should say, yeah, we should do the whole of the prologue, but in reality the whole of this prologue is several hours long, and not everyone's going to be interested. And 13 unfortunately completely repeats this mistake, because 13 also has some pretty interesting gameplay mechanics, but it waits until you're already several hours in before any of them come to light. And what's a shame is that Final Fantasy 13, as much as I don't hate it and I don't think it's the worst Final Fantasy, it does have one of the slowest, most painfully awkward and cringy starts to a Final Fantasy game. The first 2 chapters of the game are just rough. They're not great. And what doesn't help is that when the game does pick up, the level design doesn't. Like, the level design is completely linear for the most part of 13, so even when the gameplay does pick up, you don't feel like you're exploring or navigating or finding new things. Listen, I know there's an element of bias with me, because 13 I actually really enjoyed on my first playthrough. It was only retroactively when I've gone back on repeated playthroughs that I've noticed more of its problems. But my very first playthrough of 13, I had a time of my life. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually didn't like 12. I was the other way around for most people. A lot of people said they didn't like 12 up until 13 came out. I was the opposite. I never really liked 12. I struggled to have it resonate with me, but really grew with the 13 trilogy. Well, minus Lightning Returns. I don't think anything's going to make me like that. But 13.1 I actually thought was pretty decent. It has issues, absolutely, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And 13.2 is amazing. You can't convince me otherwise. But 12 I really struggled with, and it was only in my later years and around the time the Zodiac Age came out that I got back into it, gave it another go, and ended up really enjoying it. Maybe just because I was older, so I had more patience, because this game is a patience game. There's a lot of moments in this game where you have to be pretty slow, and the pacing of this game is very slow, despite the fact it is a pretty interesting story. It's the main reason why we're going to be spending 99% of this adventure of the game running at double speed. Hence the 2 arrow icon in the top right corner. You can also have the game run at quad speed, but I don't want to run into walls every 2 seconds. So, so that's not happening. The Switch and Xbox One version also have a few extra bonuses that have yet to reach the PS4 version, and I can imagine at some point later down the line they'll get patched in. And I say this because something similar happened with the modern console port of Final Fantasy VII, 8 and 9, that when it came to other platforms it had a few tune-ups, and then a little while later it got patched onto the PS4 version. So I can imagine eventually that patch will come to Zodiac Age. It's just as it is right now, there's a couple little quality of life things that aren't in this. But there's nothing big, there's no big changes, it's just like quality of life and glitch fixes and things like that. And once you get everything, you're immediately warped back, and the kid's leg is miraculously all better, which makes me feel like we just did a job for him. But 12 did grow on me when I came back to it, and I do thoroughly enjoy it. It's not one of my favourites. I enjoy games like 15 just that little bit more, even though I had more problems with 15. But it is a good game, and I can recommend it to anyone who's curious, especially if you've never played Final Fantasy. Because this game is complicated, it is slow, but at the same time, it gives you access to everything by the end of it. There is not a single thing surrounding the Final Fantasy gameplay-wise that you won't understand by the time you're on the other side of this game. This game boasts the highest selection of spells in the series, and it even divides it into more categories than previous entries. Because before, time magic such as haste, slow, and things like that, because that's the only 2 I can think of at the top of my head, were tied to black magic. Because they were still aggressive, you were nerfing or buffing. Well, sometimes haste was put on white magic, and that was always up to discretion, and it was something that was always a point of, well, which is it? Is it, if it's a buff, shouldn't it really be with white magic? Yeah, but it's the opposite of slow, so it should be with black magic. In this game, they split it into 3 categories, and they just make time magic its own category, with its own list of spells. And there's a lot. The listing for white magic, black magic, and time magic is so gargantuan, I'm almost guaranteed to not be able to show them all off, even if I go through absolutely everything in this game. Because there are some spells that you just either won't find until they're already out of use, or you just won't find. In the original version of 12, this wasn't so big a deal. Because in the original version of 12, you brought every single spell in the game. Whilst with the final mix version, or the international version onwards, they made it that some of the more elite or special spells have to be found instead. And off the top of my head, I don't know the location of every spell. If I'm only missing like 2 or 3 by the time I've done everything, I'll bring up a guide and hunt them down. But as it stands, I will only be showing off as many spells as I can find. I won't be showing off every single spell. Same as I probably won't be showing off absolutely everything in this game, but I'll be trying to show off as much of it as I can. But once you get back, after you get your Sunstone, Penelo will leave your party, leaving you back to a party of 1, and so the Gambit system gets deactivated per se because you have no real need for it.
Well, I should probably be getting back to the store. Actually, I was kinda supposed to be watching the place for Miguelo. And Vaughn, try to stay out of trouble. For me, I don't know what I'd do if you weren't here, if something happened to you.
I'm not going anywhere, okay?
That's what I wanted to hear. See you later.
Sorry, Penelo.
The risk we're about to be taking. Penelo has left your party. So you're back to a member of 1, so if you go back up to the Giza Plains, those enemies are going to be hurting you just a little bit more than they were. But giving the Sunstone to Old Darlin here, he will instead give you the Crescent Stone as a reward.
To know how to sneak into the palace, eh? First you go to Storehouse 5. You know the one. 2 doors she has. Now the right takes Ban Ratsbane to his territorial hunting grounds in the sewer bottom. But that's not the way you'll go. No, you'll take the left door, down into the Garam-Scythe waterway. The waterway leads to a stair. The stair to the palace cellars. That's your way in. But don't go counting your gil just yet, my boy. Getting into the palace was the easy part. The way into the treasury is carefully hidden. That's where this Crescent stone comes in. The magics it bears can open the hidden door to the treasury, you see. Listen, Von, for the words I shall speak are most important, and not to be forgotten. Do you understand? The Signet yearns for sunstone strength to light the clouded way. Once in the palace, you'll find the Signet tile, very important. Give to it the sun's power, and it will light your path. Very well. Oh, a warning. Be aware that if you're caught, you'll spend the rest of your short life rotting in the Nalbina dungeons. So, look sharp, my boy. And don't go running off before you're ready. Plans freshly hatched have a habit of tumbling from the nest straight into the hunter's stew pot.
Squads 3 through 6 are in place. They stand ready. So far, the Imperials haven't noticed a thing.
Then go now and hurry the others. By nightfall, we must ensure all our men are in place.
Sir! Sir!
Old Darlan meant what he said. When you enter the waterways, and when you get through them to reach the bottom of the palace, the game will warn you again that once you enter the palace, there's no going back. He will not be returning to Rabanastre for quite some time, so do the last of any grinding you wish to do, any item collecting you wish to get, and any equipment you really want to acquire, any hunts you want to do, the list goes on. Do everything you want to do now, then head towards the palace. Your best place to grind will be in that waterway because there are so many enemies and there are so many opportunities for you to make the most of your situations and grind out. However, as much as you'd think I'd be taking this opportunity to go do some hunts and show off some extra stuff, even though it will be a while before we return to Rabanastre, I'm going to head straight there pretty much. There's very little outside of showing off the shops that I want to do, especially because we're going to be getting new team members soon, and they are going to be applying to us far more than we need. There's a door over here that is currently locked that you won't get access to until you've done the right hunt, but for some reason is marked on the map now, which is peculiar because most other places that are similar to that aren't marked on your map until you have done the hunt. But over to this person, there is a travelling merchant just next door to it, and when you're ready you can open Storehouse 5. To which this good old tyke is still here, good old Kites. There's two doors from here. The first door will be where we first saw Varn taking down those rats if you wish to just grind some basic street rodents. On the other side though is the waterway that will take you through all the way to the bottom of the palace, into the palace cellars. And for some reason Kites just magically opens the door, which is weird because they didn't need to have Kites just magically decide, oh, I want to open this door now. They could have just made it so like when you interacted with it, Varn just goes, well, this door's rusted, on like then when you need to come here, like when you need to go, he just kicks it or something. But I digress. Welcome to our next dungeon per se, our first proper dungeon per se as well. The Garam-Scythe Waterway. It's not a long dungeon, but we will be returning to it several times before we're done with here, so learn it now. But that being said, next time on Final Fantasy XII, we'll be trying to sneak into the palace on the Garam Waterway, or the Garam-Scythe Waterway. But until then, you guys take care now.